Hello, and welcome to Hopeful Conversations, brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is Andrea Davis, a former secondary education teacher turned screen time navigator. Andrea is the founder of Better Screen Time and is on a mission to help parents take the slow tech road. Andrea, thank you for joining us today, and welcome to Hopeful Conversations.
Thank you, Kari. It's my pleasure.
So tell me about a better screen time.
Yes, well, it was born out of my own need to figure this all out because we were low tech parents. We were the parents who kept our TV in the closet. We pulled it out for family movie night and for the Olympics. My husband's an engineer, so he even crafted this homemade antenna made out of cardboard that we would use so that we could watch the Olympics. And we generally, we took our kids to the library, did all those things, and loved that life. And then times changed, technology changed, and our kids started to grow up. And it was no longer feasible to just put everything in the closet and hide from things. I realized that we needed to take a new approach. We needed to teach, and how I learned that the hard way. Our family moved across the country from Illinois to Oregon, where we now live. Our oldest was 12 at the time, just turned 12, and we handed over an abandoned smartphone to her, and purely as a communication tool. In our minds, it was she was like the ultimate oldest child, like the kid who cleans her room without being asked. And so I just purely thought, we'll get in touch with her. She'll know where to get off the bus in this place where we don't know anyone. And fast forward a few months later, and I was, she came home from school one day. She was spooning her cereal into her mouth, her after school snack, and then she was doing this with her other hand, scrolling. And I had this moment where I thought, where did my kid go? This used to be a moment when we connect and we had a conversation. So that was my first red flag. And several months after that, I was in the kitchen on my own phone, leaning over the kitchen counter scrolling, and I came across a post where my daughter was lip syncing the words to the song, and she was singing about a Glock and holding her hand to her head like a gun. And it was at that moment where I realized, she really doesn't understand these lyrics that she's singing. And it just mentally pulled a trigger in me, and we realized that we'd given her too much too soon. And so we took back the smartphone and we went back to a brick phone, which was extremely painful for all of us, but it was one of the smartest things I have done as a parent. And so it was at that moment that I realized I needed to share that with other parents. Number one, so they could not make the same mistake that I did, but also realize that they could turn things around, that they could change their mind. And now that, that daughter, she will be 20 next week, and is thriving. And while it was painful and not fun, we then started taking the slow tech approach. And so that's how Better Screen Time came to be.
Thank you for sharing that. So she was 12. I know when my kids that was for the end of sixth grade is when both of my kids got phones going into middle school. And I would say I probably gave them phones just for safety reasons, and the communication piece, not knowing what I was not, I mean, is that fair to say, not knowing what I was giving them, or if I was naive?
Yes.
But now it's 2024. This is a different time. And I think parents probably are quite aware of what they're handing over to their child, regardless of what age they choose to do that. From doing research on your organization, you have to do this proactively.
Yes.
Because it's harder to do reactively and make the changes after you've given this device with everything into their hands.
Exactly. And so I have 5 children, and I can't tell you how much easier it's gone with the subsequent kids, simply because I knew better, but also we were more proactive. We put a plan in place, created a family tech plan, and sat down and talked about, here are the pros of tech, here are the cons, and these are things that we need to watch out for. We need to work together as a family. This is on all of us, for me as a parent to make changes with my tech habits as well. And yeah, so I always tell parents it's never too early to prepare, and it's never too late to turn things around.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
God, I see little kids, and I looked on your website, and you have different age groups. But like,
Mhm.
you see parents at a restaurant, and little kids that can hardly hold a phone are already holding a phone.
Yes. Yeah.
Where
No,
do they put that back when it's
exactly. And I think, yeah, as parents, we need to think through that. This is a tool. What is its purpose? And I tell parents, younger parents, I'm like, you kind of have to pretend that you're parenting 15 years ago with your little ones when it comes to tech. Just pretend that phone is yours, and you have to come prepared to the doctor's office and the restaurant and everywhere with the coloring books and the activities and all the things that we used to have to do. And I think that I so clearly see this just because I have so many kids, and I kind of bridge that gap between our generation of parents and then this younger generation. My youngest is 10, so she's 5th grade, and it's a different world. And so you have to approach it differently if you don't want your kids to grow up to be what people call iPad kids. That's what people tell me. Yeah.
that was their babysitter, their entertainment from at the restaurant, at the doctor's office,
Yes.
was learning on their own to just like the creative and fill space, fill those voids.
Exactly. The creativity, the ability to be bored, the opportunity to just be still and to experience that white space. It's such a gift, and it's not something that we're always that we're remembering that we need that as humans. Our kids especially need that.
Some of the stats that I found they seem a little bit old. I wonder where they are today. Like, what do you think the average age that kids are getting their first smartphone is?
Yeah, it does change depending on location, country to country, but on average, it really is around 9 or 10 years old, which is very young.
It is very young. And on
Mhm.
average, children are spending 7 hours a day on screens,
Mhm. Yes,
including school time.
not including school time.
That's a big portion of the day.
It's a huge portion of the day. Yeah.
So, how do we change that? How do we be proactive in a relationship together with our children to live a different lifestyle?
Yeah. Well, when we realized that we were going to need to teach our kids about it and still use it, but we wanted to have that healthy relationship, we sat down and we just made this big list. I talked about the pros and cons, but we did like a thumbs up and a thumbs down list. And I said, okay, thumbs up. What are the things we love about tech? And we made our list. And then I said, okay, thumbs down. What are the things we need to watch out for? And that's such an important first conversation for any family to have, because what it does is it helps your kids develop a skill called digital discernment. And your kids need that because we can't always rely on parental controls. We can't always be there. Different homes have different rules. They have different media in their home. The school is supplying a lot of technology now, and our schools are. And so that is another challenge. So our kids do have to carry with them kind of this internal filter and being able to recognize, hey, that's a positive use of tech and that's a negative use of technology. And so I recommend that that's where families start. And then moving on to
Digital
great.
discernment.
Digital discernment, exactly. And then and talking to your kids about what that is, like what is discernment? Discernment is a skill. It's an ability to distinguish between right and wrong, good and bad. And the other beautiful thing about that conversation is you can have that within the lens of your family's values and your family's goals, because we are all going to use tech differently, and how what do you want to prioritize in your home, whether that's outdoor time or that's family game night, or that's dinner time, conversation. We all have our different things that are really important to us that we want to instill in our kids. And so just talking to them about that. And then that next conversation can be your family tech plan, which is basically, what I was sharing. You want to talk about where will we use screens? Where will we not use screens? What are we going to do on the screens? What are we not going to do? Where, when are we going to use them? How long is okay. And that's a good conversation to have just in teaching your kids about just helping them kind of self-assess and be self-aware, because as they grow, they are going to gain more access to technology. So like, how do you feel if you've been on a screen for 3 hours, or if you were gaming or watching TikTok or whatever the thing might be at the moment? Yeah, how do you feel? And kids know, and teenagers know, and just having an honest conversation. And I think as parents, we can always share our own experiences of either wasting time or seeing something we didn't want to see, and what did we do, and what are some changes that we're making as parents. And that's just been, I think, the most effective approach in our family and in the families that I help, when the parents are also getting on board. So that family tech plan can cover everybody, everyone in the family.
Family, not just for the children, not just for the kids, for the teens.
Totally. Yeah.
Your own habits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and teens especially like that, because they don't love it when you're being hypocritical as a parent, right? I guess they see it more, right, than just like young kids. But as they get older, they start to feel like, well, mom or dad, you do this. And so, yeah, it's effective for a lot of reasons.
I've heard that from kids. They know when an adult is listening or not. And you can't listen if you're scrolling and not, like, we think we're really good at multitasking, and we're not great at multitasking. Right. There's so much, like, how do you break this? Like, what type of parents tend to come to you? Are they proactive, or is it like a reactive, like something has happened? Or do you both types of families?
I get some of both. I think especially in the past couple of years, there have been more proactive parents, because they're starting to see like their nieces and nephews, or they're starting to see the tech in the schools, and they're not loving what they're seeing. And so they want to be more proactive. Whereas I think when I started this, there were fewer proactive parents, because I think the reality of the dangers and the problems weren't as apparent to everyone. But I can't tell you the number of parents that I get that will say, I wish I would have found you sooner. They'll have an 18 or 19-year-old son, perhaps, who's really into gaming, or a daughter who's just super sucked into social media. And they'll feel like, there's no way back, which there always is. But it's obviously a much longer and more challenging road at that point, because they've developed these habits. They haven't learned to almost like self-soothe or sit with that quiet space. They are accustomed to turning to a device when they're bored, anxious, depressed. And so it is a retraining of those habits and helping them to find other things. We talked about the 7 hours a day. The biggest thing there obviously is the opportunity costs. What are our kids not doing if they're spending that much time on a screen? Well, they're not, helping mom unload the dishwasher. They're not out riding their bike, skinning a knee, and like learning that resilience and grit of getting back up. And you just don't gain those same life skills from a screen. You never will. They can make screens as virtual and as real as they want. It will never replace real life.
It's so hard to hear. Yeah. And just, I wonder how those brains have developed as well, because we don't often hear that type of research, how it's rewired, having all of communication just on the screen versus that eye to eye, that how that you process that and being heard. Because are you heard through a text?
Right, exactly. And, a lot of that is because why we don't know is just a lot of that research is ongoing. And so what we have to remember as parents is that technology moves at a much faster rate than science does. It always has, but especially in this past decade. And so we've got this technology moving at such a rapid pace, and the technology sectors have a lot of money to throw at that, whereas you've got, I talk to researchers all the time, and I read their papers, and they're um, grappling for money to be able to pay for these studies that they're doing, and these studies take years, and so there's a lot that we don't know. And that's why I tell parents, like, trust your gut, trust your intuition. Like, if you've got a child and they're missing out on sleep or face-to-face connection or physical activity, and those things that just we need as humans, that's your sign that there's too much tech happening.
How do you set healthy boundaries with a 12-year-old that you're maybe going to give that phone for safety reasons, even with the right intent, like my child's more active in sports, I'm not with them as much? What does a healthy boundary look like?
Yeah, I think first off, one important thing for parents to know is there are a lot of tech tools now that weren't available years ago. One of them being phones that we call starter phones. So there are phones that are available that don't have social media on them. They don't have an internet browser. And I highly recommend that every parent start with something like that or a watch, and you can communicate with each other. You can limit the contacts that they have, but you're not giving them access to the world, which, some of us did because that was the only option, and we were unaware, but we have better resources now. So that's the first thing. Also, definitely having a family tech plan in place. So talking to your kids, you create your plan, but they can also help you come up with consequences if people don't follow through with the plan. They can help come up with those. And there's a lot of experimenting that goes on there. It's a living document. Technology will change, your kids will grow, so you can change things on it. It's not like this is our family tech plan, it's always going to be this way. But I highly recommend putting it on the fridge. We have ours on our fridge, because when a child is asking for more screen time, or someone is breaking a rule, maybe taking a device into the bedroom, or whatever boundary you've set that they're crossing, then you have that family tech plan in a visible place you can refer to and say, let's look at this. This is what we decided together. And obviously, as parents, we can offer a little mercy and, provide a few warnings, but then we can look together like, hey, these are the consequences we decided on, that, perhaps you don't get the privilege of using this technology until you can follow through with this. And we actually have a self-evaluation on our website. It's called Am I Ready? And it's really helpful if you have a child or a teen asking for a phone or a device, and
Am I ready?
Yes, it's called Am I Ready? Am I ready for a personal device? And so anyone can download that. And I just put my teacher hat on and my parent brain and was like, what do I wish I would have had when my daughter started begging for a phone? And it's this. So there's a list of questions for the child or teen, but there's a list of questions for the parent as well, to help you both see, like, have we had conversations about mental health, about pornography, about all these scary things that do happen on tech? And have we created boundaries? Have we created a family tech plan? And then for the child to ask questions like, do I get up for school on my own? Do I do my homework without being asked? I mean, there's some pretty big responsibilities, but that really is what it takes for a child to be ready for that step. And so if they're not ready, and you are not ready, and you simply need something to communicate, then just getting a watch that can only do like 10 numbers, that's definitely the way to go.
I'm glad and your website is betterscreentime.com. I'm
Correct.
glad to hear that you talk about these alternative devices, because when my kids were the age, like you couldn't, those weren't available.
No.
Kids could get around everything. So I think there's a group of parents like, yeah, I don't trust any of those screen controls or any of those things, because teenagers are the ones that can figure it all out
Oh
to,
yeah, and they still do. Like Apple screen time controls have come a long way. They're way better than they were when, you and I first started, but they still are faulty at times. And just like you said, teenagers are they're smart. They can get around a lot of things.
so that naive part for parents, like, and then you also talk about fear, like on your website, that the fear that parents have, like, how do you get around that? I get that a lot when I talk about losing my son to suicide, and I
Mhm.
never want anyone to parent out of fear. Like,
Yeah,
fear paralyzes. Like, I want people to feel like they can do it.
I love that. Yeah, you're spot on because well, what happened after we went through this hard experience with my daughter is that's where I went. I started reading all of the books about everything that can go wrong and I started parenting from fear. And so initially I was like, "Okay, these are the rules with screens." And I got a lot of eye rolls and like shoulder shrugging and just blank stares and the kids were like, "Mom's lost it." And also just like I could see almost like the hurt in my daughter's eyes where I remember sitting down at the kitchen table and I remember her saying, "Mom, I feel like your generation just thinks that our generation is just basically losers. Like we aren't going to make it and we're all just going to be addicted to our phones." And that was kind of my aha moment where I was like, "You know what? This isn't going to help anyone. Like this is I'm parenting from a bad place, just like you said, like being paralyzed. She's feeling like she's the worst human ever. And as are her peers when we show up to the conversation that way." And so I think there is a place where we can delay devices. We can have positive conversations with our kids about healthy tech use, but we can also voice that we believe in our kids and that they are going to be a great generation. They have different challenges than we had, right? And their mental health challenges and all the things coming at them. I think a lot of us say I would never want to be a teenager right now. And yet here they are, and so I love what you're doing, how you are bringing the teenage voice to the conversation around suicide because that's so important. And it's the same with technology, just like listening to them. And that doesn't mean that we don't hold boundaries as parents. And as parents, we don't need to know everything about tech to create healthy boundaries. And that's one myth I feel like I get a lot where parents just feel like, well, my kid knows more about it than I do, so I'm just going to give up. And that is not the right approach. So we can have boundaries, but we also, just as you said, like we want to parent from a place of confidence and not fear.
That was very vulnerable of your daughter to share that at a young age. And I agree, like her generation, teens in general right now, they're so capable. They've just grown up in a really different time. And like the
Mm-hmm.
blame that we have put on these devices, and that blame, I think, has transferred sometimes to the kids.
It
Like, if
does.
you would just put your phone down, you wouldn't have a problem.
Yeah.
That's not fair. Like, the phone is not the
Mm-hmm.
problem. It's
Mm-hmm.
skills, like this discernment that you're talking about. How many parents sit down and have that conversation with their kids?
Yeah, exactly. So it's exactly. And we have to have those boundaries and we need to delay the devices. And, I have a 17 and 15-year-old daughters that don't have social media. And like, that's a pretty big deal, but it feels very right, considering where they're at and what I know. And I love seeing them spending their time doing other things. And but they do use devices. They have devices that have limits on them, but they text their um they have apps they use to text coaches, sports coaches, and they text their bosses. I have my 17-year-old is doing math tutoring. And so
They have friends.
yes, have friends. And so I think that is like, as they get older, we have to give them a little bit of credit and believe in them.
Oh, goodness. Tech is here to stay. It's not going away. What about the battles with the kids? With, like, if they make a bad choice and they don't follow that family plan, how do you handle some of that?
Yes, that is hard. It's different with different kids. And so I can say that because I have different personalities in my home. And 4 of my 5 kids are teenagers right now. One is out of the house. She's a young adult, but it won't be the same with every kid. But making sure you do have equal boundaries for everyone, because that they will notice that if it's different for someone else. So we're holding everyone accountable, and that helps because they're like, oh, I'm not singling you out, but you broke the rule or the boundary that we set. So we need to talk about this. So we try our best, like with our teenagers, to involve them in the conversation and ask, well, what do you think's fair? You broke the boundary. And so what's a fair consequence? And we're usually always willing to try whatever consequence they want to come up with if it's within reason. And if it doesn't work, then we're like, okay, we need to try something else. And but that has to be part of it because the technology is so powerful. It uses persuasive design. It's designed to keep us hooked. So I think that's another piece of it, is educating our kids on that part so that they aren't feeling like this isn't me against you. This is like, we're on the same team and we're battling this technology that is designed to keep us all hooked and connected. Not just you, but and talking to them about brain development and what we know, that, hey, your prefrontal cortex isn't fully formed yet. Nothing wrong with you. It's just the stage of life you're in. And so that's no match for this persuasive design. So that's another piece I found to be very helpful, is education rather than blame.
I like that.
Yeah.
Those smartphones designed by the same people that design slot machines is what I've always heard. And slot machines are like, were the original most addictive device designed, but it's probably now our smartphones.
Totally. And I mean, you think about slot machines, before you had to like go to the casino to access that. Whereas now, like, the slot machine is literally in your pocket and everything's there,
And that reward center part of our brain, those dopamine hits that are happening when we see different things and when we post something and wait for those likes. It's so interesting.
It really is. Yeah.
It's a hard time that we're in as parents and as teenagers. I mean, parents just want the best for their kids.
Totally. And I just say, like, listen to your kids because, they know a lot about, just like you and I were talking about earlier, the kids know. And when it comes to technology, they know what apps everyone's on and they kind of know what's going on. So, like, ask them. I think parents spend so much time worrying about knowing what all the latest apps are. But there will be certain apps that your teen, it isn't a thing at your teen's high school or with your teen's peers. Just ask your teen. Like, they will know, like, what apps are the teens using. They're going to be your best source of information.
There has to be a level of trust there, though, versus,
yes.
I mean, developmentally, there is this kind of stage of secrecy, and I want to be my own person. I want to make my own decisions. That's hard.
Yeah, and that's true. And you're not going to get a response from every teen. Again, they're all different, but we can start the dialogue, kind of start the conversation, and they may not take the bait. They may not want to engage that much, but that's when, we just work on the relationship. And that's, what I tell parents and what I have to do if there is a tricky situation that comes up related to tech. Sometimes
I
we
don't
just
know
have
if
to
it's
set
my
that
wind in
aside and just
Colorado.
focus on the relationship.
I had a little bit of a delay there. Can you hear me? You can. Okay. Good. Good old internet speeds. But that's okay. That's why we recorded it. Riverside's cool because it records on two different that all state, and we'll cut this part out.
Perfect. Okay.
That's why we
Awesome.
use Riverside. It's really, really friendly for editing.
Perfect.
I want you to tell us about your courses. Like a parent, what is available on your website, and what does that look like for a parent that wants to be proactive and do this right together with their child?
Yes. So we have a course called Creating a Tech Healthy Family. It's the course I wish I would have had years ago. And again, my background's in secondary education. So I taught school before I stayed home with my kids. But I love learning about habits. So in that course, we start actually with you as the parent and helping you with your habits. And then we move into working with your spouse or partner. If you're parenting with someone else, that's a big piece of this, getting on the same page, and then working with your kids. So it's like, what conversations do you need to have with them? Creating a family tech plan, all of that is in our Creating a Tech Healthy Family course. And then we have a separate course called Untangling Teens in Tech. So that's for those parents who maybe they're down to a teen or two and they feel like, okay, we kind of didn't do this how we wanted to from the beginning, and now we're a little stuck. And so that's where I'm helping parents. It's more of a one-on-one approach with a teenager. And then we've actually put both of those courses inside a Tech Healthy Family Hub, which is just a community where we have a lot of like-minded parents who want to take the slow tech road. So you can come into the hub and have access to both the courses. And then we do monthly master classes. And this morning I just taught a class about, new year, new rhythms and resetting your family's tech. And it's just a place to get the support and accountability that you need.
And these are video modules and available for a very affordable price, self-paced, but a lot
Yes,
of resources.
totally.
I like how on your blog I read about the daily bookends and you talking
Oh
about the new
yeah.
year. That just like struck me as an adult in my 50s. Like, hey, how am I starting my day and how am I ending my day?
Yes. I love that. We actually just released a brand new set of templates that I just sent to my email list this morning. And it has they're goal templates related to technology, but they're broken up into different categories. And the first one actually is morning routine. One of them is like your evening routine, but giving you like a place to start, because sometimes people don't know where to start when they're wanting to change their tech habits. So it's like, for example, one of them is set up a charging station in blank, like whatever room, for all family devices by blank, by a certain date. And, if anybody that's into goal setting, that that's an effective way to set goals, is being very specific and being able to measure it and all of those things. And so these templates just kind of help you get that started, and we'll have that up on our website soon because we just released it today. But that's a good place to start if you want some bookends to your day.
Sounds intentional. Like, and that's something that my husband and I have worked a lot on is just being intentional about like here. I mean, it's just the two of us at home and we're intentional about our devices. Like we have a rule,
Yeah.
8 o'clock at night, like, and sometimes we have to remind each other if we're sitting together watching television, like, hey, thought we had that rule. Like, we're not talking about what we're watching. We're not talking together. We're scrolling.
Yes. I love that. I love that you shared that, because I think sometimes people think these are just, I just have to do this so I can keep my kids under control so they don't get addicted to tech, but no, this is for all of us because we want to prioritize our own health and well-being and our relationships. And so your relationships continue with other people in other ways, and tech can easily get in the way of that. So I love that you're doing that.
It's easier to be like proactive and instead of waiting for things to like bubble and boil, like, I can't have that conversation not in the heat of the moment, like with a child that's made a mistake with their device. Like, okay, I'm going to step back and cool off. And what are we going to do together for a consequence? Oh.
Totally. I love that.
Were you a Love and Logic mom back in the day?
I read that book, but no, I am familiar with it.
That one was tough for me. I remember that when my kids were really little. Oh, goodness. What am I missing to ask you about a better screen time that you want our listeners to hear about?
I think it's just important to remember that this does matter. It's easy to get sucked into the headlines and either, start to kind of panic about it and not do anything and feel paralyzed, or throw your hands up in the air and be like, we just got to get through this. My kids will figure it out. But neither approach will be healthy or helpful to you or your kids. We do have to take a proactive and, as you said, Kari, an intentional approach, because tech is everywhere. It's here. If it's helpful for anyone listening, you almost can think of it like food, where it is an integral part of our lives, but we have to make choices about what we're taking in, and we're not always going to get it right, and that's okay. We don't have to be perfect, but it really does matter. Like, your kids only get one chance to grow up, for their brains to develop amazing skills that will help them for the rest of their lives. And, if anyone's listening and feeling like, oh, it's too late, it really is never too late. I've had parents come in with 18, 19-year-olds, and they've made changes and they've helped their adult children, and they've just started with an apology. Like, I'm sorry, I missed the boat on this one. It's easy to have had happen the past decade. So I have a lot of compassion for parents of our generation, because we were thrown into it without a lot of help or insight. But the help's here now. And so, come to betterscreentime.com. We have lots of resources to help you, some free, some paid, but wherever you're at, we have something for every parent.
I appreciate that. It's never too late. I want parents to hear that. Like, you can do this.
Yes.
You'll get through this.
Yes.
Okay, we end every podcast with the same question. Andrea, what does the world need to hear right now?
To believe in our kids.
Mm-hmm.
To not think that our kids are not going to make it because they're growing up in such a fractured world. If we believe that, how can our kids believe in themselves? And so, yes, they have challenges that we didn't have. And yes, our world has a lot of problems, but the world has always had problems. I look to my grandparents who lived through World War II and the Great Depression. And I'll never forget being in my grandma's kitchen. And she was a great cook. She could make something out of anything, because she had lived through that generation. And she would scrape every last little bit of like sour cream or whatever it was out of a bowl. Like, nothing went to waste. And I think, what, lesson did she learn from living through that time that she's passing off to me? And I get choked up thinking about it, but I can't help but think, like, what lessons are our kids learning now that we even can't foresee, that are not only going to help them get through this time, but it's going to change generations to come. But we have to believe in our kids, that they can rise up and be leaders in this generation.
I 100% agree. I believe in a lot of people's kids. I believe in kids, like, as soon as I get the opportunity to meet them 99% of the time. And they are so capable. And so, like, when you give a child just like a little bit of a nugget, what they're able to do with that and run in it when they feel heard and then when they feel valued, it empowers me as much as it empowers them. But just believing in others, there's so much opportunity, and we're going to do this together.
Yes, I love that.
Well, this has been really wonderful, Andrea. I really appreciate your time, and I thank you for joining me on a hopeful conversation. And to our listeners, remember to tune in to our next episode. And until then, remember, hold on, pain ends. Thank you.
Thank you.